Hello, folks. Welcome to Holding On with Holder, where I talk to interesting people about interesting topics. My name is Steve Holder, and I am your host. My guest this evening is Rob Roselli. He is a conservative Christian author and activist. Welcome, Rob. Glad to have you with me.
Hi, Steve. How are you? And thanks for having me.
I am doing well. So glad to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about you and who are you, first of all? How would you describe yourself?
Well, basically, I'm just a cog in the wheel out here in the imbecile majority. I'm not really anybody famous. I have authored 3 books. Um, I live in New Jersey, married. I work. And I'm just a concerned citizen, I guess you can call me at this point, and just try and get the word out and trying to get as many people saved as I can in these last days for both
Yeah.
the United States and unfortunately the world.
So you're a Christian?
Absolutely.
So do you enjoy talking about religion and politics and current events?
Well, I think they're all kind of converging at this point as we get to this well, they always have been converged, but now they're coming to some kind of climax. So, the intermingling of them all is greatly accelerating here in these last days.
Yeah. So what do you think about the wrath of God? Do you think maybe God is pouring out some wrath on the world now because of the things that are going on?
Well, no, I mean he's getting ready, but it's being held in reserve. I think Second Peter chapter 2, right? He's holding it in reserve. He's long suffering that nobody should perish. So I believe right now this is the age of grace, and we're coming up to the end of it. So if you're not a Christian, and boy, you better figure it out quick. And my website's laid out just along that premise. Um, so no, I don't believe that the wrath of God has been unleashed yet, but it will be unleashed, and when it is, it's not going to be pretty for those that are involved.
So do you believe in the Great Tribulation and are we close to it?
Well, as far as the Great Tribulation, I mean, in John 16, I believe it was John 16, and Jesus said, in the world you have tribulation, but be not afraid, I have overcome the world. So, and he was talking to the disciples and the apostles and the women that were following him at the time. So I believe there's always been tribulation in some form or fashion for 2,000 years. I mean, William Tyndale, John Wycliffe, Martin Luther, these kinds of people have been suffering tribulations. Galileo and others have been other Christians have been suffering tribulation. But I believe in a climactic tribulation, a great tribulation. I believe is one and the same with the wrath of God. So yes, I believe we're coming up to it, but I don't believe we've hit it yet. And I'm not a big well, anyway.
Do you what do you think is the overall message of the book of Revelation?
Well, it's very cryptic in nature, and there's a lot of debates. I mean, I've read it and reread it, and I could probably read it another 100 times and not fully comprehend it. But the overall message is it's a warning to an unrepentant mankind. You got the 7 churches, and that covers the full spectrum of what it is and what it is not to be Christian. I mean, you have the Church of Philadelphia, which was the ideal church, basically, and then you have the Church of Laodicea, the lukewarm church, which I believe parallels America like none other. Modern day America, the formerly Christian America, being overtaken as we're watching before our very eyes. And then also, I believe the mystery Babylon in Revelation 17 and 18, that God executes his vengeance upon, or his wrath. I believe that is in fact the United States, New York City in particular, but I think the United States as a whole is the mystery Babylon of Revelation 17 and 18. And I have a whole ebook written on that subject, and I'm without a doubt, in my opinion, that's the case. So
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? So are you talking about the great whore of Revelation?
absolutely,
So that's the
absolutely.
United States?
I, um, I have no doubt it's the United States, and if you read through it about how it influences the world, how she sits on the beast, but the beast hates her, which kind of reminds me of, she controls the beast to an extent, just as the United States controls it. But much of the world today is getting to really hate the United States for all its bravado, its foreign wars, its hypocrisy, its debt. Okay, it's covering the world with pornography and all kinds of sicknesses. Okay, sexual deviancy that we see coming out, and of course the debt of the Federal Reserve System. So the world has gotten drunk on all our idolatry and our and the Federal Reserve System. It's gotten, and it's waxed rich. Okay, now waxed rich is a term that's used, and that means basically it's wax, of course, melts under heat. It's a false construct. So I go through in my ebook. I go through the history of one world government. Okay, and then I go through line by line Revelation 17 and 18, and I make the case for the United States and what's going to happen. And then if you look at New York City in particular, you had the Federal Reserve, you have the headquarters of the Federal Reserve System. Okay, you have the United Nations, okay, and the World Health Organization, and Lucifer's publishing company, which is known today as Lucis Trust, which is an offshoot of the United Nations. Okay, so you have literal devil worship and world government combined in this entity known as the United Nations, as well as the disseminators of death known as the World Health Organization, who I believe was behind the AIDS virus, disseminating that back, 30 years ago. And of course, they're right in the middle of this latest COVID crisis and all those shenanigans. And then you have this church called St. John's the Divine on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which populates the front cover of my first book. And I'll just flash that up here real quick. Okay. This is my first book here. It's quite a read, but anyway, that's St. John's the Divine on the Upper West Side of Manhattan with its capitalist pyramid on it, financed by one J.P. Morgan, the same J.P. Morgan that brought us the Federal Reserve System that I just talked about, that just waxed the world rich through its debt and its fake money printing. Okay. And St. John's Divine just happens to be the home of the modern religious environmental movement. Okay, and the environmental movement, which is just a thinly veiled, um, a thin veil of science over population control zealots. That's all the environmental movement is. This whole global warming, global cooling, climate change. It's just a push. It's just an excuse to limit the world's population. So you have these genocidal maniacs. So in summary, you have genocidal maniacs, you have religious environmental nuts, you have the Federal Reserve System, and you have world government, all emanating from one place. And in a nation that was founded as a Christian nation, and that was founded under favor of God. If you go back and you read all the miracles of the revolution and all that sort of thing, and you read about the founders, who were, albeit imperfect. I get it. Some had slaves and all this sort of thing, but most of them were devout Christians, and most of them prayed. Okay, you opened up the first session of the Continental Congress opened up with a reading of the 35th Psalm and this sort of thing. So everything I just mentioned coming out of a nation that what nation has been blessed more than the United States, and what nation has, been blessed from a Christian perspective than the United States. And to take all that and to go where I just mentioned about New York City and Mystery Babylon. And let's not forget, one other thing I should mention is the abortion industry. Okay, that's another thing that we export is abortion, the abortion industry, and we're up to way beyond Holocaust numbers with that. If people think I'm exaggerating, I mean, babies as young as 10 weeks, 15 weeks feel pain. they're already formed in the womb. So when you stick its head with a catheter and suck its brains out, a live baby, how much better are we? I mean, we sit here and call people Nazis and call people Hitler and all this other sort of thing, which is subject to my second book, but that's not the point right now. But how much better are we than Adolf Hitler and Mao and Stalin and these other monsters of recent history, when we've put to death no less than 70 million babies in the womb?
Yeah.
So yes, the wrath of God is waiting for this nation. He's waiting for people to repent. And this is why I'm very adamant about people coming to Christ while there is still time.
Now, do you consider yourself a Bible scholar, Rob?
No, I don't. I read the Bible. I try to, I try to memorize verses. I study it. I have my Strong's Concordance. But I got to be honest with you, Steve. I mean, the more I read the Bible, the more I realize, the less I know about it. It's like that saying, the more I learn how little I actually know, or something like that. So I believe it's that way with the Bible. But I try to read the relevant chapters and do the best I can.
So based on something you just said a moment ago, do you think the United Nations is satanic or evil?
Yes. And I say that from personal experience. I mean, they have something called Lucifer's Publishing Company, which was founded by a woman by the name of Alice Bailey. I don't know if you ever heard of her or not, but it's an NGO, a non-governmental organization of the United Nations, and today it's known as Lucis Trust. And I used to go to, I went to a few of their meetings, and I still get their literature in the mail, and it talks about one world government and talking to ascended masters, which I believe are angels of light. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. And these people are in there communicating with ascended masters and supposedly ghostwriting all their literature. And Alice Bailey was someone that claimed she was ghostwriting for an ascended master by the name of Dijwal Kul, okay, or some name. But the point is that just as the writers of the Bible were inspired by the Holy Spirit, the writers at Lucis Trust are being influenced by what I believe are demonic spirits. So that's a lot of very influential people have been through those doors, and that's intimately tied with the United Nations. And so anyway.
So how does the Federal Reserve fit into that? I mean, I'm like you, I've never felt good about the Federal Reserve, and it's rotten to the core.
Well, the Federal Reserve finances everything. The Federal Reserve kind of goes along with, is kind of the economic arm of the push for the one world government. They basically bought the United States. They own the United States. They own most, some percent. I was reading a recent article. They own 50% of the mortgages in this country or whatever. But
Yeah.
not to get too technical, but they fit in because they're the economic arm of the push for one world government and putting people into debt and making us all debt slaves. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
And
they're the ones that loaned the money to all the big businesses and the bailouts. So
yeah,
everybody's indebted to the Federal Reserve. So
that's exactly correct.
that's
And it's
that's a lot
mathematically,
of power there. That's a lot of power.
well, power flows through the purse strings, and they've got all the purse strings. And
Yeah.
so,
So do you think global warming is a part of Bible prophecy? Does it fit in any way?
yeah, it comes out of the United Nations. A lot of the funding from the places like the Club of Rome, and global warming, and my background is civil engineering. And I actually have a link on my website, boxofsunglasses.com, called An Inconvenient Scientific Method. And I go through, it's about a 15 or 20 page link. And I go through Al Gore's book, An Inconvenient Truth, and just illustrate what a scam it is. And I'm not saying there's not pollution, and places like New York City and Los Angeles don't have localized water and air pollution problems. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying this scam that carbon dioxide which is good for the earth and good for trees. They need it to grow. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Say carbon dioxide is bad, but anyway, um, yeah, no, it's a complete scam. And again, it's just an excuse to push for one world government. They can, anytime you get a weather event now, they can just call it global warming. And you notice they changed the name of it to climate change because they don't know whether it's going to warm or cool because you can't predict the Earth's weather. So they call it climate change, and all bases are covered. So they can make the assumption that mankind is evil and population needs to be limited, or else the Earth is going to die from global warming. So it's justification. In a nutshell, it's a justification for population control and things like abortion, and that's why they say we need
You
them.
mentioned
Anyway,
something about they think the world is evil. Well, that principle is biblical. I mean,
yeah,
the
well,
Bible says over and over that we're all wicked.
that's true. That's a good point, but they're saying that people are evil, but they're saying it from a secular standpoint. The Bible is saying it from a Christian standpoint. So in other words, if you believe in Christ and then you become new, you become a new man, right? I mean, Romans chapter 5 and all these other verses, you go in there, you become born again. I mean, John chapter 3, then once you're born again, then you're a new creature and you get to live on the earth that God provided, that promised Noah and, back there in Genesis chapter 8, that he would never destroy the earth again. But if the
Now,
current population leaves them no choice, but these people are just evil from the standpoint that the population needs to be controlled, and they have deified themselves. In other words, they made themselves God. They've taken God out of the picture and made themselves God. So that's the key difference.
so why do you think they want to depopulate the world?
No, they're evil. They're psychopaths, and a smaller population is easier to control, and it saves more resources. They can collect more resources for themselves. I think it's as simple as that. I think these people are, some of them, if you look at Bohemian Grove and these sorts of things, and what I just showed you with, the back of the dollar bill with the illuminated eye above the capitalist pyramid, these people are devil worshippers. I think they're just pure evil. And less people out here in the world is more resources for themselves and easier to control.
Now, are you talking about a group called the Illuminati?
Yes, the Illuminati. I mean, they're tied in with the Skull and Bones crew up there at Yale University in the 322. And the Illuminati, I mean, in a nutshell, I mean, the group the Illuminati was formed May 1st, 1776. And, but in a nutshell, the Illuminati means illuminate, as in an illuminating, as in an all-seeing eye that's illuminated, as in the all-seeing eye in the back of your dollar bill above the capitalist pyramid. Now remember, Jesus called himself the stone that the stone the builders rejected.
Mhm.
So I believe the builders he was referring to was this group of Freemasons. I mean, they changed names throughout history, but the Freemasons they consider themselves builders. They consider themselves builders of cathedrals like this place, right?
Have you ever been a Freemason?
No, no,
Uh,
I've visited. I've gone to a couple of Freemason open days, Freemasons, and I've talked to Freemasons, and I don't want to sit here and bash them as a whole group. I believe there's a lot of them in these local lodges. They don't know anything. I've gone into several of these temples and asked loaded questions about the Illuminati, and not disrespectful, but just to see what they know or don't know, and a lot of them don't know. They're just there to join and fraternal. And then they do some on the lower levels. They do some charitable work, Shriners hospitals and this sort of thing. I'll grant them that, which is which is a very good thing. But I'm talking about, just like with anything else, I'm talking about the upper echelons of Freemasons. that have existed throughout history, that have built all kinds of stone temples all around the world. The most famous, which are the Giza pyramids, with this capless pyramid of Giza.
Uh, Well, I am a Freemason, have been for several years, and I'm not a devil worshiper. I'm a Christian.
Yeah,
Most of the Masons I know around here are Christians,
yeah,
and you know that whole Illuminati connection, that's just ridiculous.
yeah.
It just is.
Well,
99% of the things you hear about the Masons and read online about the Masons are just fallacy. That's all just crazy stuff. Uh,
well, like I said, I mean, most of your local lodges around the nation, I found, and I respect what the Freemasons do as a group, but you know, I've done my research. I've got plenty of books. I mean, the builders, when Jesus talked about the stone the builders rejected, I believe he's talking about particularly the stone of the capless pyramid of Giza. Okay, and then here we have the illuminated eye on the back of our dollar bill, which just so happens to represent the Federal Reserve System, which we talked about, you know, just a little bit ago, which is right in the middle of this whole push for a new world order. So it gets a little complicated, but anyway,
so what you wrote a book also called The Un-American Genocidal Complex. Tell us
yes.
about that. What's that all about?
Well, this is the book here, and this is here's the Georgia Guidestones. You know, another example of a temple built. This is the Skull and Bones logo. This, you know, the Skull and Bones, the organization up there at Yale University that's tied in with the Illuminati and with the CIA, and then here's the United Nations building. And these three entities, when you tie them together, is what I call the Un-American Genocidal Complex. And I put the Nazi swastika on there because I go through the history of the American eugenics movement and how it's tied, how it directly influenced a certain Nazi rabble rouser by the name of Adolf Hitler. So in a sense, without the American eugenics movement, Adolf Hitler doesn't exist. So I make that case and I talk about the environmental movement and what they really believe in, which is just population control. And then I go into the AIDS epidemic of the late 70s, early 80s, and how that was a man-made plague brought to us by the World Health Organization. And that's basically it. And then I got it fully documented in the back. It's fully documented with government documents and all this other sort of thing. So I'm just making this stuff up. I mean, everything's fully
So you're
footnoted.
saying the World Health Organization started the AIDS virus?
Yeah.
Why did they do
Circumstantially,
that?
well, circumstantially, yes, I believe that's the case.
Do you think they also started the coronavirus?
Well, I don't know in this if they started it, you know, directly just like they did with the AIDS virus, but they're certainly right in the middle of the mix. The World Health Organization out of the United Nations is certainly right in the middle of the mix of trying to cover it up for China for whatever reason. I don't know. I mean, after a while, this stuff gets confusing.
Yeah, it sounds pretty confusing. It really does. And I'm sure there's a lot of people hear the things you're saying, Rob, and say you're just a big conspiracy theorist and you don't know what you're talking about. I'm not saying you don't know what you're talking about on all of it, but I know as far as the Masons, you definitely have got it wrong. I mean,
All right, fair enough.
huh?
Fair enough. I I don't mean to disrespect you or, you know, but I agree with you on one level, but on a certain level, I guess we'll have to
Well,
disagree.
I hear a lot of theories from people, you know, about Masons who say they've read books about Masons and they've heard sermons about Masons. But are any of the books you've read about Masons written by Masons?
Absolutely.
I mean, wouldn't we be the ones that know about it more than anybody else?
Well, Albert Mackey wrote the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, Manly Hall, Albert Pike.
Mhm.
I have all of them. I'm not going to sit here and say I read them all cover to cover. I mean, the Secret Teachings of All Ages from Manly Hall.
Okay,
That's what I'm saying. With all due respect, we'll get to a certain point where we'll disagree, but I agree with you. I mean, you've obviously done some great work and you have fellow Masons that are Christians, and I agree on that level. I think they do a lot of good work. I don't have a problem with that at all, but it's just, anyway, we'll just leave it at that.
so you also wrote a book called Pleased to Meet You. Now tell us about that. That's a very intriguing uh, title, and I read the teaser for it, and that was very intriguing also. So tell us about that.
Well, pleased to meet you. This is my third book, and um, so basically what it is, it's just I took John Carpenter's They Live and a couple other John Carpenter's movie. I took Orwell's 1984 and I kind of threw them into a pot and wrote about and made a conversation. I don't know if you're familiar with C.S. Lewis and the Screw Tape Letters.
Oh, great book. I love that book.
So I took the concept of a demon or Satan having a conversation. In this case, the same kind of thing. It's just a conversation between a Satan character and another character called O'Brien, who represents the establishment, and they're just talking back and forth about history and how Satan was really the one really in control of the whole thing. And, just like the humans think they're in control of all of this mess, but, Satan is, and then ultimately God's in control of the whole thing. And that's basically the gist of the conversation. And
Yeah.
that's the premise of the book.
When I read the title, it kind of reminded me of the Rolling Stones. Do you remember their old song, Pleased to Meet You?
That's where I got the title from.
Okay, yeah,
I couldn't call it Sympathy for the Devil. That would have been a copyright issue. So
yeah,
Pleased to Meet You works.
yeah. That sounds like a very interesting book. I wouldn't mind reading that.
I'd appreciate it.
Now, how does Planned Parenthood fit into all this? I know you've said some things about that. I think I've seen part of an interview you did that you mentioned something about Planned Parenthood. Are they part of the genocide?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Planned Parenthood was started by a woman by the name of Margaret Sanger, and it started out as something called the American Birth Control League back in the 30s. And Margaret Sanger was right in the middle of the whole eugenics movement, the American eugenics movement I was talking about a bit before. That's covered in my book, The Un-American Genocidal Complex. And she, basically her big thing was, why bother euthanizing people, or why bother institutionalizing people that we believe are unfit? Why not just kill them before they're even born? That was her basic, in a nutshell, that was her belief. And
Yeah,
her particular subject, I mean, her particular ire was the black population. As a matter of fact, abortion, one of the names it was originally, well, it's called the Negro Project, because Margaret Sanger wanted to go in all the black neighborhoods and eliminate the Negro population. And today that's still true. I mean, the large majority of Planned Parenthood clinics are found in the large, majority black neighborhoods, which is kind of ironic. I mean, Planned Parenthood today is a big Democratic. It's a major piston in a Democratic engine, and most black people vote Democratic. Don't ask me to explain that one, but they're voting for people that literally want them dead. And that's just it. I mean, that's as simple as that. Of course, now Planned Parenthood is spread out, to the suburbs, to the white populations. So, like I said, I think it's up to 70 million since abortion was made, quote, legal by the Supreme Court in Roe versus Wade. And that's just the United States. And there's international Planned Parenthoods. That's another thing. The United States exports. We don't export steel and corn and wheat like we used to, but we export debt from the Federal Reserve System, and we export abortion and pornography. So that's
Well, I
Margaret
believe it's
Sanger.
Iran that refers to the United States as the Great Satan for those same reasons.
I mean, I hate to sit here and, look, I don't want to sound like, one of these people that's going to run out and start burning the flag. And that's absolutely, hopefully I'm not being misunderstood here. I mean, 99% of this country, I absolutely love, and it's my country. It's our country. And I hate to, I mean, I know a lot, I've done my homework, but I hate having these conversations because it sucks. I mean, I have friends and family, I'm sure you do, to talk this way, but unfortunately the country's been overtaken by very evil people,
Yeah.
and
I,
I'm not sure where
I
it
do
goes.
agree that you're on the right path with all of this. I do believe that. Uh, it's just when you get into the Masons, that's when I guess I depart from your theories.
Well, we're two humans, we can disagree, and that's fine,
Yeah, yeah, we
respectfully.
do
And
that. Yeah.
so
What do you think about Donald Trump? You think he was good for America or is he bad for America?
I think he was great for America. I mean, he was definitely an outsider, and the way you know that is the way they attacked him from the press and all these investigations and all this other sort of thing. And he wasn't perfect, but he didn't get
I
the
can agree
chance to
with you
really.
on that.
What's that?
I can agree with you on that. He was not perfect.
No, not at all. But in terms of immigration and what we did with energy independence and the unemployment rate for minorities, especially the economy, he did a lot of good things, and I believe he was setting up to somehow get rid of the Federal Reserve System because he never got the chance. The last president to try to rein in the Federal Reserve System was JFK, and we all know what happened to him. And Donald
Bobby
Trump's.
Kennedy, big on that also. Wasn't he really trying to do something about that?
What's that?
Bobby Kennedy, wasn't he also involved with trying to bring down the Federal Reserve, or was he mostly just after
I think he
the
was. I
big
think he was.
unions?
Bobby Kennedy was more interested in trying to bring down some of these big mafia guys. I don't know as much about him as but he was sticking his toes in the wrong place, and then
Yeah, obviously.
so. But
So you have the three books. One is called what? The first one, The Theory of Evolution.
well, the first book is they. What I did is They Live. I took the movie They Live. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Roddy Piper.
Yeah, I remember it.
So anyway, I took They Live, I embedded it in the theory of evolution, and
Okay.
subtitled Great Society of the Undead. Of course, the undead being the United Nations, and the Great Society. Well, we can spend hours talking about the Great Society and what that has done, but that's another scam. And then the second book, The Un-American Genocidal Complex, which we talked about before, Georgia Guidestones, which we can cover that on a future show if there is one. And then Pleased to Meet You this is the third book. It's about an hour read, the last one. So
Okay. And where can people get your books?
my website is boxofsunglasses.com, and you can go on there, and the links to all the books are on there. You can scroll through. There's some writings. I really trimmed down the website. It used to be a lot more to it, but I trimmed it down quite a bit. So there's just a few articles posted on there, the books,
Okay.
and then God's Simple Salvation Plan
Very good.
on top. So
Well, Rob, I've enjoyed talking to you. I thank you for being on my show, and encourage people to check out Rob's books. And folks, thank you for tuning in to Holding On with Holder. Please subscribe to my channel. Feel free to share this video all over social media. Get Rob's books, and boxofsunglasses.com is the website, correct?
that's it. Just like the box in Roddy Piper's They Live, the box of
Okay.
sunglasses. People don't know that. So
Rob, thanks for being my guest. I've enjoyed talking to you, and maybe we'll do it again sometime.
all right, Steve. Thanks again. God bless.
You too, brother. Bye-bye.
Good night.